Back here in CBS Sports HQ, presented by Geico. Get more with Geico now that the Philadelphia Eagles have been crowned winners of Super Bowl 59. We're on to the next, Super Bowl 60 in Santa Clara, California at Levi Stadium, where despite the defeat, the Kansas City Chiefs have the best odds right now at plus 650 to win Super Bowl 60. You see the Bills, Eagles, and the Baltimore Ravens all there behind them at plus 700. So really, how can the Chiefs rebound from this terrible loss last night and get back to the Super Bowl, but also win it? I mean, let's start here with, the first thing Andy Reid is doing this morning is rewatching this tape, right? And figuring out what he maybe could have done differently. How can the Chiefs get back to the Super Bowl? What needs to start happening right now?
There's a couple things. And one, I don't know if Andy Reid will watch it. He might not want to watch this one for a little bit. It was just bad. So they might just take a breather and say, you know what, let's just take a break. But they will have looked at the, the entirety of the season where this team did struggle, especially by their standards. It's relative, and they still had the #1 seed, but they have to address some of these issues. And some of those were on full display in the Super Bowl. Left tackle is one to me that jumps out. They had a revolving door there trying to figure out competition, who was going to play that position. They have to figure that out. We saw that, be, something that just would plague them throughout the game with Patrick Mahomes running for his life. They also have to go back to Travis Kelce and say, all right, are you coming back? Or the retirement has been talked about. I think this will probably bring him back with maybe a new fire lit under him, saying, all right, I think everybody comes back a little bit hungrier. I'd also like to see them realize what happened in the game. The fact that Patrick Mahomes was running for his life and saying, you know what if we start getting after opposing quarterbacks a little bit more, and Chris Jones could use a little bit of help along that defensive line. They don't have a ton of cap space, but they do have 4 draft picks in the first 3 rounds, and I think that's where they've got to hit. And they've done a good job. Xavier Worthy was a great draft pick. We saw him develop throughout the season and make such a a splash in the later portion of the season, the playoffs. But I think in the draft they're going to have to crush it with those first 4 picks, and I think they will.
Yeah, honestly, I think this game was a long time coming. The last 2 seasons, the Chiefs have not been as explosive on offense, and they've been winning more defensively, and Mahomes maintaining the game and then finding the ways to win it at the end. And they just played with their food too much, and it caught up to them. They mastered the art of winning fourth-quarter football games. They mastered the art of one-score games, which a lot of NFL games are. But what do you do when you get behind too much? What do you do when Mahomes doesn't have the time? Obviously, Danny mentioned they got to address the offensive line. They got to keep their quarterback up. He looked uncomfortable in some of these Super Bowls. He's got to be more comfortable to the offensive line. And I think that they need some more explosive playmakers outside of Xavier Worthy. They don't have so much team speed. They kind of keep getting veteran receiver, veteran running back. I would love to see them bring some prime player in there. And then defensively, right, outside of Chris Jones, they let Snead walk. They let a lot of these guys walk, and they'll still find a way to win, and it doesn't matter because Mahomes is so great and Andy Reid is so great. How many more years does Travis Kelce have left? That's a big part of the dynasty there, or what they had going. How much does he have left in the tank? And then who is going to replace that production and trusted of a Travis Kelce is going to be huge. Mind you, Tom Brady won a bunch of Super Bowls, took 10 years, then he won a bunch more Super Bowls. Is this the 10-year gap they're going to go through before they find their next Gronk or they find their next Edelman, wherever that is? But I think some of this Kelce train's getting a little old. They got to replace some of that with some young, fresh talent in there. So they got some work to do, but I think this one caught up to them how they've been playing the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, Logan, that's actually a really good point. We'll see what moves they're able to make this offseason. Let's go ahead and work our way around the league here and teams that can be contenders next season for the Super Bowl. In that category, it has to be Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens. How can Lamar, Logan, get through those tough January games that you always talk about, you've been a part of, to ultimately get to the Super Bowl?
I think they got to stay with it. I think they got to stay persistent. They have a really good roster. They arguably could have the best roster in football still. Similar to the Eagles, they have really good on defense. They have some youth on defense that's really good. They got some guys in their prime that are really good. They got some older players that are still playing really well. And offensively, they get to the playoffs and you just lose their way. They get off track. Playoff football is about making the other team flinch first. They're going to take away what you do best. Right? The Chiefs try to take away what the Eagles did best in Saquon. They still had counters. And the Ravens always seem like they forget their counters in the playoffs. I think they got to just keep drafting well. I don't think they need over-sweeping changes because it didn't work out well this year. I think they have a really good roster. I love the Derrick Henry addition. I would keep addressing the offensive line, because if they have a dominant run game like the Eagles have, they can run their way to the Super Bowl and have Lamar Jackson win in the end. So I would address the offensive line and try to lean on that run game. I like what they have. They just have to play better in those big moments. And you don't have best of sevens. You got to win that one game 7 in the NFL playoffs. They got to play better in those game 7s.
I love what Logan's saying, because it's not like time to panic. They just need to get some stickum in the glove so Mark Andrews can hang on to that ball.
That's actually not a bad idea with the dagger there, Danny. Okay, last night, you guys, we were watching the game. I think a bunch of Bills fans were just saying, I told you so. This should have been us, right? Thinking that last night. How can Josh Allen give Bills Mafia what they want, which is a Super Bowl?
The Bills need to give Josh Allen what he needs, and that's some more help around him. It's interesting, because in the MVP debate, it basically came down to Lamar Jackson had all this talent on that roster, 8 Pro Bowlers, and meanwhile, for the Bills, they only had Josh Allen and one other in his left tackle. And I do think the offensive line is good, so you don't have to address that. But I do think around him, and including on the defense, where they could use some pass rush help, some secondary help, but also, most importantly, giving him a true weapon. Like, ever since Stephon Diggs has been gone, they really haven't had that true #1 guy. Khalil Shakir is nice. They brought in Keon Coleman. They've got Dalton Kincaid as a tight end, but they need to give him some dude on the outside to kind of help him take that load off of his shoulders, make that offensive attack more dynamic, so you're not having to ask Josh Allen to carry this team like Superman, put it on his back and carry them. So I think they will address that too, but they've got to get Josh Allen some help so he doesn't have to do it all on his own.
A few teams need some dudes this offseason. I love that term. Logan, Lions here, they suffered a heartbreak to my Commanders this year. All season long, they were looking like the team to beat. How can they get back to that with some new faces in personnel positions as coordinators this year?
Yeah, they got new play callers. They got to have guys that can call it at a decent level, and then they need to draft every single draft pick on defense. Okay? Their offensive line's great. They know what they're doing on offense. You got to trust Jared Goff. They got to put all their time and attention on defense to get better at the perimeter, at the corner position, to get better up front, to rush the passer. And I understand they had a lot of injuries this year, but what about the depth? What about the depth? I saw Cooper DeJean go out, and they had Avonte Maddox, who was benched all year, come in and make a play to help them win that game last night. So they need to have more depth. They need more youth on their defense. They got to spend all 7 draft picks, maybe more if they want to trade down, and put them all on defense.
Let's get to the 49ers. That is a team that would love to be at the Super Bowl this next season, playing at their home stadium. How can they really, Logan, regain prominence here and get to that championship game?
They got to take a deep breath. I think they're tired of coming up short there. I was in that building. It's really frustrating. And then this year, everything just fell out. The bottom fell out. Injuries through the roof. They got to get healthy. Debo Samuel's requesting a trade. They're going to put out a lot of fires here. They got a lot of guys that miss games, and a lot of these guys are older players or players in their prime. You're going to have questions about Hargrave. McCaffrey didn't play the whole year. Hufanga came back, was injured. Ayuk, who paid all that money, had an ACL. Trent Williams. So everyone on their roster was decimated. They got to go back, see who's healthy, infuse some youth in this roster, have a great draft class, and be ready. And they're going to try to host a Super Bowl next year. I know that organization. I know Kyle Shanahan, how competitive they are. That ownership group, they want to host the Super Bowl next year. They're going to go for it next year, but they got to bring some youth in that lineup, because a lot of their older prime players kind of got banged up this past year.
Yeah, we're going to lean on you, Logan, throughout the entire offseason for all the insight out of the San Francisco 49ers organization. Danny, with the Eagles' Super Bowl win, they finished the season 16-1 with their only lone loss coming to my Washington Commanders and Jaden Daniels. Of course, as we know, Jalen Hurts suffered that concussion in that game. Okay, we hear it, we get it. But this division rivalry just got a whole lot more interesting. You have the top organization in the Eagles versus the up-and-coming and rising organization led by Jaden Daniels at the helm here. How can Jaden take the Commanders to a Super Bowl and win it in his second season?
Oh, so I think this is easy, and I love this one, Jordan. I think you'll like this too.
Okay.
This is where you go all in. Like, you put all the chips and you say whatever it takes, because you've got Jaden Daniels, the Offensive Rookie of the Year, MVP candidate, who looks like the future as bright as possibly could be, and you say we are not going to spare any expense. This is not a time to pinch pennies. It's not a time to worry about certain situations, you go do whatever it takes. And you've got plenty of draft capital with 7 draft picks. You got $80 million in cap space. There is, a Myles Garrett out there that is sitting there saying he wants to be traded from Cleveland and wants to go someplace to contend for a Super Bowl. You are kicking the tires on that if you're Adam Peters saying, all right, let's see if we can make a deal. Les Snead at the Rams. Remember his philosophy with the draft picks was bleep them picks, and it paid off. And they went all in. You explore every avenue to get the talent around Jaden Daniels to get him there. Defensively, I think they need some help. They were 17th in sacks. That's not good enough. That's an area where clearly Myles Garrett could help a tremendous amount. You go out and look at a guy like Byron Murphy, who's a free agent for the Vikings as a corner, potentially bring him some help there. But Jordan, you do not do anything except go all in while you've got Jaden Daniels on his rookie deal and you've got money to spend.
Yeah, definitely. They don't need to pinch pennies with the third most cap space in the league right now. So a good off season, it could make for a very fun season next year for the Commanders. Let's talk about the Packers, Jordan Love and company. What has to happen for them in order to give them a chance?
So it's interesting, we've said a couple times, and I would say it again here, is Jordan Love needs a kind of a receiver, a guy, if you will, like we were talking about with Josh Allen. And this is where it's a great time to be a wide receiver who's considered a true number one. Maybe it's T. Higgins. If you lose out in those sweepstakes, maybe it's a Keenan Allen, that you've signed as an older veteran presence, but need a true number one receiver. The other areas I would look at potentially are interior offensive line to bolster the interior of that. You're set at offensive tackle, but help out Josh Jacobs in that running game. Maybe even get a little bit of depth at running back so he doesn't have to carry so much of the workload. But this is a Packers team that I do think is pretty close. Now they've got Jordan Love secured with that 4-year, $220 million deal. Now you've got to try to tweak this roster, not major changes, but tweak it so that you can take that next step forward.
Let's get to the Bengals here, Logan. I hated seeing Joe Burrow just look like a sad puppy at the NFL honors down in New Orleans. He hated to be on the red carpet. He wanted to be locked in, watching film, prepping for kickoff at the Super Bowl. How can he ensure that is the case next season?
The Bengals are in a tough spot because T. Higgins likely is going to walk away. They're going to have to pay Jamar Chase more than if they just would have paid him last year. So they kind of bit themselves in the butt with that. You got to maintain Jamar Chase. He's not going anywhere, but your other buddy has got to leave. And, oh, yeah, you need all your help on defense because you didn't have one this past year. So they clearly got to address defense and pay Jamar Chase. But how much better does that make them in terms of what Joe Burrow needs on offense? Is the offensive production go down because he kind of lost his 2 number 1 receivers, which make them really unique. That's what made them unique, is the both of them. Now he's going to lose one to trade for some defense. You always need offensive line help with Joe Burrow. You got to keep him healthy. When he is standing and he is healthy, you have a chance to win any game regardless of defense. So obviously, you got O-line, you got some defensive health, but they're going to be losing a big one in T. Higgins. I don't see how they keep both those receivers. They really bit themselves in the butt. I'm not getting it done last year. Now they got to kind of learn the hard way.
All right, lastly here, you guys, to put a bow on this, let's talk about the Chargers. Expectations certainly there for Harbaugh's second season. How can he meet them and take this Chargers team to the Super Bowl?
I think you should see a big step forward. I know they were good this past season, but this is where you really want to start seeing Jim Harbaugh's cultures take place and take root. They've got a lot of cap space with $55 million to spend. They have 11 draft picks, including 4 in the top 100. Again, another team that could use another receiver to add to Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson. The edge rusher position is going to be a question mark. Khalil Mack's a free agent. The future of Joey Bosa, what does that hold? Maybe that's a spot they go to in the draft to get some more help there. And then again, this is another team. Remember Jim Harbaugh when he drafted Joe Alt, and he talked about what you could see in his eyes how much he loves offensive linemen. Maybe now they look at the interior of that offensive line and maybe look at that in the draft, but try to build up a physical presence that Harbaugh wants to bring.
Looking forward to it. All right, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me here at CBS Sports HQ. Hello, off season, right? With that,
never an off season.
Right? Yeah, no, never a dull moment. All right, you can catch all of the latest NFL news, highlights, scores right here, CBS Sports HQ. It's all here and it's all free. And welcome into CBS Sports HQ, presented by Geico. Switch and save, get more with Geico. I'm Jordan Giorgio. We begin with the absolute dominant performance from start to finish by the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59. Jalen Hurts and company were seeking revenge and got it as the Eagles captured their second Super Bowl title. Jalen Hurts, who was crowned Super Bowl MVP, said after the game, defense wins championships. Isn't that the truth? This elite Eagles defense defense, made things absolutely miserable for Patrick Mahomes all night long, who was sacked 6 times and recorded 3 turnovers as the Chiefs' hope of becoming the first team in Super Bowl history to three-peat was destroyed. Let's go ahead and check in with the highlight. Super Bowl rematch. Chiefs beat the Eagles in Super Bowl 57, trying to become the first team in NFL history to complete the three-peat. Eagles looking for revenge, as I mentioned, their first Super Bowl since defeating the Patriots in 2017. 7 minutes left in the second here. Patrick Mahomes fires on the run, and he's picked off by the rookie, Cooper DeJean. On his birthday, the newly 22-year-old puts the Eagles up 17-0. Mahomes would get his first career playoff pick 6. Early in the fourth we go. Mahomes loads up to go deep, and he is just surrounded by this Eagles defense. Ball is out, recovered by the Eagles. Milton Williams with his second sack on the day, and the Eagles go on to win their second Super Bowl title in franchise history. There is the yellow Gatorade. As you take a look at the Eagles' Super Bowl appearances in franchise history, get their second Super Bowl win, stop the Chiefs' three-peat in the process, now have a chance themselves to go back-to-back. So how can they pull it off? Let's go ahead and find out as we now welcome you back into our CBS Sports HQ studios. I'm joined by our own Danny Kanell. We've got Logan Ryan also joining us. I mean, we all are ingredients here, right? Like, this should be a national holiday. Correct?
Oh, without question.
Yes.
Yes.
We should be off today and just chillaxing.
Especially for us three.
Most definitely.
Definitely.
Most definitely. All right, you guys, let's talk about how the Eagles now have an actual chance to go back-to-back. Getting 1 is hard, Danny. Getting 2 back-to-back is also hard. And going 3, three-peat, we saw how that happened. So how can they do it?
So I think one of the hardest things is maintaining the hunger that comes with what it takes to being a Super Bowl champion. Like, you hear about motivational tactics and what goes into work in the off-season of preparation and off-season training and off-season workouts, and having that hunger, that mindset that is, we want to do everything. We want to pay attention to every tiny detail to make sure we have every basis covered. Now all of a sudden you've got distractions, you've got award ceremonies, you've got all kind of appearances, golf tournaments, endorsement deals that come along with being a Super Bowl champion. So, like, from the mindset, that to me is one of the hardest obstacles to overcome. And then it becomes, you have to retain your best players, the players that make up that roster that was so special. And yet most of the time for a lot of these players, and granted, you've got mainstays that will be under contract, but a lot of guys are going to try to get paid off of this Super Bowl. And I don't blame them one bit. It's just what happens. So you've got to try to make sure you really decide what players you absolutely cannot afford to depart with, and you'll go ahead and make those negotiations work and pay them what they're looking for. And then you have to make some very hard decisions of guys that want to get paid, and you're like, you know what, you were really good, but we can't afford you, or we're going to try to go younger through the draft. It's always one of those awkward dynamics that comes on and unfolds when you're trying to see a repeat champion.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've got my 2 Super Bowl rings in 3 years, but wasn't able to do it back-to-back. It's because of all the points that Danny said. The roster changes every single year, no matter what. You're going to bring in new rookies. Some guys got to go. Free agency, some guys are going to go for better opportunities, maybe like a Josh Sweat. He looked like he earned himself some money there. Maybe the Eagles are built to bring him back. Maybe they're not. And then your players' roles are going to change. Cooper DeJean is not the rookie sensation next year. He's going to be, people know who he is. But the main reason is the NFL doesn't make it easy on you. When you win the Super Bowl, you get the worst pick in the draft every round. You get number 32. You get also one of the hardest schedules next year, right? You're going to schedule the other divisions number 1, and you're going to have top teams. You're going to have the most primetime games, probably traveling across country for the top matchups. You're going to kick off the season first. You're going to have the longest season because you have the first game, and then you have the shortest offseason. These guys just got done playing. You got to report to OTAs in mid-April. That's not a long break when you've been playing for 9-10 months. You only have 6 weeks or so off. So it's really just not set up with the rest time, and you got to hope for the injuries. because when you play in the Super Bowl, that's a lot more practices. That's 20-some extra practices you have on your body playing intense football games in cold weather most of the time. So all those extra longer seasons, you see how it catches up. You're going to play the best schedule next year, going to play the best teams. And by the way, you're getting everyone's best shot because someone can make a name for themselves when they pick off a Jalen Hurts or they match up with an A.J. Brown. So not only do you got to maintain your hunger, you're going against the hardest schedule, the shortest rest, everything that the NFL does to make it hard to go back-to-back.
Yeah, we'll see how they're able to fill some of those big names that you saw on that list, those that will be free agents starting, next season. Another thing that really they're going to need to have to go back-to-back is keeping this elite defense, right? What can you really say, Danny, about Vic Fangio and the job he was able to do in year one?
It helps to have great elite talent up front, right? I think it always starts with the Jimmys and the Joes rather than the X's and the O's. But when you've had a guy who's spent his entire life, orchestrating great defenses, putting those players in great positions to succeed, then that obviously has a huge part to do with it. And Vic Fangio comes in there, brings a mentality, a physical mindset. But going back to the, aspect of the talent that Howie Roseman built on this roster, they didn't have to blitz one time the entire game. That is just complete domination up front. But I do think when you're talking about game planning, and there are other times where you do have to blitz to get pressure, you do have to have your players prepared for every single look they're going to see to try to check those tendencies of where a quarterback's going to escape from or where, what alignments do you see certain plays run from. That's where the defensive coordinator comes into play. And Vic Fangio was an incredible get for them this offseason. And I think you saw the fruits of that on display with a complete domination, what I think was probably Patrick Mahomes' worst effort. And it wasn't only the fact that he was running for his life. There were times when he didn't see players, and that was great disguise in the secondary coverages. They were able to keep him guessing most of the night. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Vic Fangio.
Yeah, out of everything that the Eagles did to repeat next year, all the great things they accomplished this season, I think this defense might be the easiest thing they can do to repeat. Right? A dominant defense. They didn't do it with the Legion of Boom out there. They don't have 2 Hall of Fame corners out there. They don't have the best middle linebacker to ever play the game. They don't have like these pass rushers that are making $30 million like some other teams have. They're doing it with young players. They're doing it with scheme. Coaching is more important than football than any other sport, and a great defensive coach can get you a great turnaround really quickly. This was one of the worst defenses in the league last year. Insert Vic Fangio, draft a couple of rookies, find some good guys in free agency, have some good young D linemen, and now you're the #1 defense in football. They can repeat this. A lot of that nucleus will be back. Zach Bond should be back. Jalen Carter should be back. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean aren't going nowhere. Darius Slay can come back if he wants to play. Their safeties aren't highly paid players. So I think the system really maximizes some of these parts here. These are not an defense that's filled with 9 All-Pros. Most of these guys will be back. Most of us didn't know their names until this season, but man, together they played great team defense. I think Vic Fangio can repeat this next year.
Well, the offense will be a little bit of a different story. How concerned are you, Logan, with how this offense will look for the Eagles, considering that OC Kellen Moore and the Saints are close to finalizing his future in New Orleans?
I think the offensive line is more important than the play caller there. Okay. I mean, obviously, Kellen Moore is great. I don't want to undermine what he did. He just was a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator. That is very hard to do. But your franchise quarterback's coming back, right? The entire offensive line should be back. Does Lane Johnson want to continue playing? I think he does. You have the young center and Cam Jurgens. We obviously know they have the left tackle, and the guards are great as well. Saquon Barkley's under contract. I mean, Joe Shane just pulled a Dallas Mavericks Nico Harrison move, trading or letting a generational player walk in his prime. So Saquon will be back. A.J. Brown's under contract. Goddard's under contract. And you got Smitty under contract. So Jahan Dotson's a pretty good receiver in this league. He's a 3rd receiver for the Eagles. So about 90% of that talent is coming back next year, to say the least. Obviously, a coordinator is very important, but Sirianni has done a great job of rehiring in the staff and finding great coaches year in and year out. I think this offense, most of them are coming back on paper, And these guys know how to win, leading with Jalen Hurts. He knows how to win with the best of them.
I will say this, though, Logan. I do think this is an important one because while he's done a great job and Shane Steichen was great, Brian Johnson was not. And that just didn't work for whatever reason. And then you get Kellen Moore, who did inherit Saquon Barkley, right? So the next offensive coordinator, the job isn't that hard. Like, tell him, hey, you were going to run the football. But we saw Kellen Moore, who loved to throw it when he was with Dak Prescott. We saw him adapt to this offense and become more of a run-based attack. And he worked with the offense that he was given and saw the strengths of Jalen Hurts and the strengths of Saquon Barkley and being able to run it. So I do think this is a hire to keep an eye on to make sure that you do see somebody that Jalen Hurts is comfortable with. You want to probably try to keep the same terminology, the same schematics, but the play caller, the guy who was actually making those calls, I do think is imperative that they get somebody who keeps this continuity together, because I thought Jalen Hurts did regress. And I know there's been a lot of criticism about him, and it's expected when he had 3 different coordinators in 3 years. Now it'll be a 4th. How do they keep him comfortable in the terminology, the scheme, so that you don't have another one of those setbacks because he's learning a new system, learning different terminology? So I think that offensive coordinator hire is critical. The talent is there, but who's the guy calling the shots?
Logan, I see you shaking your head here. Are you in agreement with Danny here on that point?
Yeah, I mean, a coordinator is very important, and we do see some regression from year to year. But if I have a new coordinator and I have a quarterback that I don't want to regress, the 2 things I got to get right are an offensive line to protect him and give him time to figure out whatever it is. And then, hey, 7 out of 10 plays, let's just turn around and hand it to the guy behind us who's the best running back in the league. And, hey, if they have 8 in the box, let's just throw a one-on-one fade to A.J. Brown out there, who's one of the best one-on-one receivers in the league. So there are a lot of solutions for that next offensive coordinator. There's a lot of solutions for Jalen Hurts. He's not playing the toughest schemes out there because Saquon Barkley is the ultimate piece on the chessboard there that really identifies and simplifies coverages for him.
And we know what they're going to do in short yardage, no matter what. Like the tush push is not going away anytime either.
Bad cash for me, so I have a happy Jordan this morning. All right, you guys, hang tight because more from you in just a moment as we break down what it is going to take for the Philadelphia Eagles to go back-to-back, make it to Super Bowl 60 in Santa Clara, California next season. We will see how everything shakes out. Quick break for us here on CBS Sports HQ. What's next for the Chiefs after the shocking defeat last night? How can they get back to the mountaintop and win Super Bowl 60? We tell you next.